Hello and welcome to the second Bottom Line podcast on the Blood Red channel, this time with myself, Matt Addison, and as ever, our Business of Football writer, Dave Powell. As those of you who are watching along on YouTube will be able to tell alongside us both for this special episode about, you guessed it, the European Super League, is football finance expert Kieran Maguire from the University of Liverpool. There's no one better to speak to about this right now than Kieran. Kieran, welcome back to Blood Red, first of all. I'm sure it's been an incredibly busy couple of days for yourself, so thank you very much for taking the time to come on and join us.
Well, thanks very much. My big fear was when the story started to break on Sunday that somebody would want me in the studio during line of duty. But fortunately, I managed to put that down as a no-no to everybody that's asked me to have a chat about bits and bobs over the past 48 hours or so.
Yeah, certainly it was the one good thing about that late press conference, wasn't it? Line of duty was well finished by the time they came out with the official statement. But I think we'll start with the most basic of questions, really, which is why are Liverpool doing this? And is the possible argument that they can't afford not to really a valid one?
I think we need to separate out Liverpool from John Henry. This is John Henry's project as far as he's concerned. Why is he doing it? It's because of money. At present, the Champions League generates about €2 billion a year. And of course, that's split between the 32 participant clubs. And those clubs have to win football matches in order to earn the right to qualify for the tournament. We've seen, I looked at the table at the weekend, and at the time, I think Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal and Spurs were 5th, 6th, 7th and 9th. So therefore, they weren't qualifying for the Champions League. So the potential 100 to 150 million pounds you get from the Champions League, that wasn't going to be coming into their bank accounts next year. So therefore, he goes, well, how can I circumvent this? Why do I have to win football? Why does my team have to win football matches? Let's just create a sealed unit whereby it's by invite only, and that gives me guaranteed revenues and guaranteed profits. And this is the driver. The nature of the competition, because they've halved the number of teams effectively earning money from it, because there's going to be 15 founder members. 5 teams will be invited each year, but they'll get just a tiny sliver of actually the money from the tournament. So they think they can double the amount of money from the tournament, halve the number of teams. You put that into any calculator. You don't need to be a genius, and it's very, very lucrative indeed.
But does this work long term, do you think? I mean, for me, I look at it and think, well, this could be quite good for 2 or 3 seasons. We get all of these big games. We have all the excitement, the glamour around it, potentially. I mean, I don't think that would happen because there'll be a hell of a lot of protests around it. But, just hypothetically, this could work short term, but long term. After 5, 6, 7 years of this, it just becomes boring. And to me, that would make it impossible to sell this product.
I think you say that, Matt, because you are a traditional football fan. But as far as the Glazers and John Henry are concerned, we are an irrelevance because they are looking to sell a product. And that's that. They know that the NFL sells out every year. And that's the same, isn't it? You've got a sealed unit in terms of no promotion, no relegation, the same teams playing the same teams every season. And they feel that we football fans here in Europe will be delighted with a little bit of American showbiz. And I'm old enough, and you're probably too young to remember. I remember when Sky Sports started in the Premier League, and we used to have we used to have the dancers and the singers before the match and all of this type of nonsense. And the fans just said, this is an opportunity to go for another pie and a pint. And nobody used to watch it. So, but the American owners are convinced that this is what we really want. We're not actually that interested in the football. We're interested in the showbiz elements and having players, having the best players in the world, which potentially, of course, they would do, would mean that we would tune in and pay subscriptions to watch this product.
Given that it is that American model, and I'll bring you, Dave, in on this one. I know you've got some expertise in this. I mean, should we be surprised that they've gone down this route? I mean, there's a lot of American ownership. I know Real Madrid have been obviously a big part of this as well, but the other leading sort of parties in this, it seems, are Manchester United and Liverpool. I mean, we're shocked at the way it's come out and how far down the line all of these plans are, but should we be shocked that this is a route that they've chosen?
I don't think so. if you look at the three US owners of the clubs involved here, I mean, John Henry owns the Boston Red Sox in the MLB. You've got Stan Kroenke, I think it's the LA Rams. And then you've got the Glazers who own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I think if it wasn't so cost prohibitive, John Henry would have already tried to buy an NFL franchise, because that is ultimately where the money is in the US. And it remains what kind of, if you were to look at the Glazers or Stan Kroenke's Wikipedia page, their main kind of occupation is the owner of these NFL franchises, because that's the driver of their American business, I suppose. But then you've got, because it's so close, I mean, John Henry would love the idea of the fact that there's no kind of grey areas when it comes to qualification the following year, because you can only plan your budget in effect for 12 or 18 months. I mean, there's no guarantee of Champions League football, is there? So I know teams can miss out on the playoffs in the NFL, but ultimately they're protected by these huge TV deals. I mean, the latest NFL deal for 11 years is in excess of $100 billion. And it's all superstar players are very much part and parcel of all that. I mean, that's what they sell their kind of TV rights based upon. And also they find that the issue they have with the NFL is that the smaller market teams that make the playoffs, the interest tends to wane when they appear in the playoffs, and the larger market teams don't. Same for if the better players don't appear in the postseason, then the interest and the viewership wanes in that respect. So I think that they will look at this and think, well, there's all these huge market teams here that could possibly feature in this this kind of international Super League, who are all massive teams, who are all going to be featuring. So it doesn't matter who qualifies for the latter stages. There's still going to be eyes on the competition. So I don't know whether they think this is even going to be an improvement of what the NFL currently offers them. Because as Kieran will attest to, I mean, American owners see the Premier League in particular as being hugely undervalued. Because if you look at the valuations of NFL teams, I think the largest is the Dallas Cowboys, which comes in just over £4 billion. I think it's $5.5 billion. And the smallest market team of the 32 is valued at $2 billion. The Cincinnati Bengals. So there's only, I'd say, this is based on stats that I noticed from yourself the other day, came from last year. I think it's probably only four clubs whose value in the Premier League is in the billions. So for owners like Kroenke and Henry and Glazer, I think they probably see that this is an opportunity for all these clubs to increase their value enormously again. And let's be honest, I mean, this is no move to better the product for the fans. This is to better the bottom line for the owners.
I think, Kieran, it's fair to say that Liverpool were not sort of dragged along with this. They very much pushed for this from the front. And I suppose, does that kind of take away from the argument that they might say, well, we couldn't afford not to be involved in this? Well, I mean, it's not really that, is it? It's more that they've pushed for it almost from purely a point of view of just greed.
Well, certainly, John Henry is a very smart guy. He made his money through being a commodities trader. He knows the value of a product. You've only and everybody acknowledges if you're in the room with him, then clearly you're in the presence of somebody who is incredibly smart. I'm sure that's what his young wife attracted her to, the 71-year-old billionaire, and he will have done the sums and worked out the potential cash flows from a product where you are playing Real Madrid, Juventus, Barcelona every year. But it seems a bit crazy because that's what we're getting in the Champions League anyway. The last year in 2020, all 16 teams came from the big five leagues. This year, it's 15 out of 16. So we practically have that. And yes, the Champions League does need a refresh because the group games are dull. But the competition he's proposing, the group games will actually be dull as well. So I'm not convinced that of the argument that it will be a better product. And what's going to happen, because you can't have all of these sides always being successful. So when the side that's seventh is playing the side finishing in ninth in a group game when neither of them can be relegated, and as people probably know I'm a Brighton Hove Albion fan. Well, we're really excited every time that Fulham or Newcastle or Burnley are playing, because we all Brighton fans tune in, and it's the converse, because relegation is just as exciting as promotion. Take that away, and then all of a sudden half of the appeal of the product has gone. So it's purely driven by money. And when you hear Perez of Real Madrid trying to say that the coronavirus has impacted upon the sport and they're trying to help recoup the losses and money's going to be spread all throughout the pyramid of football, he's a liar and a charlatan. It's as simple as that, because these plans have been in progress for many, many years. These were pre-pandemic. The coronavirus has simply given them the opportunity, a smokescreen through which they can try to force through these plans, and that's the driving force.
Just to mention there on Perez, I mean, the financial situation in La Liga for specifically Real Madrid and Barcelona is pretty desperate, and I'd include Atletico Madrid in that. They had huge losses, didn't they, last year, based around the still paying down the debt from the stadium rebuild. Is this a case of basically this is Perez's open window here, knowing the full fact that he would be able to get at least the English clubs you mentioned, so United, Liverpool, and Arsenal to come along with this, because the US ownership sees the huge benefits in it, and this is basically all it is. It's a way of them making sure that they can continue to spend when the fact is their finances are kind of engulfing the football club in flames at the moment. Yes,
I mean the finances of the Spanish clubs were poor pre-pandemic because the clubs run the presidential model. It means that you end up trying to gain support from fans by being populist. And a great thing to be, if you're populist, is to promise to spend money. So that meant that they were not in a particularly good position pre-pandemic. Have they been hit hard? Absolutely. But then every football club has been hit hard by coronavirus. And what Perez's plans are to address the issue for 15 of those clubs. Well, there are hundreds of professional football clubs in Europe, all of whom have hopes and aspirations. And his proposals were to take away those aspirations in many regards. We've got Everton planning Bramley-Moore Dock in terms of this new stadium. Well, Farhad Moshiri, part of his driving forces behind that is that a new stadium generates more revenue, makes Everton more competitive, and on the back of that, potentially going to start to get into the Champions League. All of a sudden, that's thrown away. The guys who came into Aston Villa, exactly the same. They put in huge amounts of money. They again are planning expansion. Well, what's the benefit of expansion if you can't actually, if you can't sit at the top table? So it's a very selfish and self-interested approach, which is being undertaken by these club owners.
There's sort of been a suggestion from the Premier League, the Champions League and UEFA and various bodies that if these 12 clubs or the 6 clubs in England decide to do this, they would then just be banned from the Premier League, they'd be banned from the Champions League. But it sort of strikes me that economically wouldn't be viable, because if you take the top 6 out of the Premier League, surely the rest of the Premier League just collapses, doesn't it?
Well, I don't think it collapsed, but it's not in the interests of anybody. Liverpool fans, they still want to play Leeds. They still want to play Everton. And Everton fans still want to see them win the derby. So it would be cutting off their nose to spite their face. Nobody is denying that the 6 clubs who are planning to join the franchise league are huge drivers of interest in the Premier League, and everybody benefits. But those 6 clubs already have, on average, £350 million a year more than the smaller clubs. So they've got a huge financial advantage every year. No, everybody accepts it. You don't hear the owners of West Brom or Crystal Palace saying, well, we think that Liverpool and Manchester United and Chelsea should have less money and we should have more. Everybody accepts where they are in the pecking order of football. As far as the Premier League is concerned, what these proposals are is to say that £350 million isn't enough. Somehow Joel Glazer and John Henry seem to think that they're the victims in this, and that's just nonsense. Yeah, the reason why the Premier League is the most popular global sport is because of the unpredictability of the division. It's the fact that Crystal Palace can go to Old Trafford and win, and Sheffield United can, and Burnley and Brighton can go to Anfield and win. And yes, you don't expect that to happen very often, but it still can happen, and that is part of the reason why people tune into the sport. And this is what these owners don't understand.
Do you think that the television audience in other parts of the world would be sufficient to sort of go, well, the sort of hardcore element of these fans who will oppose all of these plans, is it big enough elsewhere around the world that it almost doesn't matter if people don't like this, because there's just so many football fans that the numbers are always going to be there in some form?
Certainly. So if you talk to the audience in Asia or the US or Africa, they are just interested in the results. They are more attuned to the showbiz element of football. It's because they're not from L4. It's just, and they're not hardcore, and they don't understand what Bill Shankly built, and they don't understand the legacy of Matt Busby and all of these great pioneers within English football, which have given us as domestic football fans such pride in our national sport. For them, it's a form of entertainment, and from the club's point of view, actually, it would be great if the hardcore fans stopped going, because they could then sell more tickets to day trippers, tourists, plastics who will pile into the megastore, spend a fortune, and also they'd spend they're prepared to pay more money for an individual match ticket. Season ticket prices to give credit, and it pains me to do this. Manchester United have frozen ticket prices for season ticket holders for the last 10 years, and you got to give them some credit for that. They could have charged more, and we have seen that in some of the other clubs as well. But if people start ripping up their season tickets, the club owners will be absolutely delighted, because there's always somebody else who has to find Manchester or Liverpool on a map before they attend a match, who will turn up, buy a ticket on the day, and pay twice as much.
It's interesting you say that, because I've got friends who are huge Reds who travel to Doha to watch the World Club Cup final and things like that. But they even this is a bridge too far for them. But do you think that it seems that the temerity of these owners to pull this stunt, which is effectively what it seems to be, I don't know whether it's an element of brinkmanship. We'll come to that in a second with UEFA, but whether they would dare do this were it not for the fact that fans can't attend games, they can't protest en masse, really, because we're still in the pandemic, and the reaction to this, had this occurred and we would have had a normal match night last night, I would imagine would have been a real show of kind of strength and unity against this, but this is simply a way for them to kind of back this away without having to have too much criticism.
Well, we always say crisis creates opportunity, and the pandemic has helped, because I could have seen last night. I'm sure Liverpool fans would have been organised. They would have probably been in connection with Leeds fans, and what we would have said, in the 33rd minute or the 11th minute, whatever it's going to be, everybody walks onto the pitch and has the match abandoned, and that's what we as fans would do until this scheme gets reversed. So yes, I think there would have been a huge reaction from fans. It was evident in terms of the protests outside of the grounds that fans were unhappy. But if you're a billionaire, you live in a gated house, you don't actually know what's happening outside. And the protests against the Glazers have never had a single piece of impact upon their behaviour. I'm not condoning those fans who got a bit awkward in terms of lobbing stuff over Ed Woodward's gated house a few months ago when there was other issues in relation to the club. But you can understand the strength of protest. These people have got brass necks. You don't become a billionaire by having a conscience or a moral or ethical compass. especially if you're from the world of banking and finance. It's an industry, as we saw in 2007 when it destroyed the world's economy. It's an industry which just focuses on the bottom line, and then it picks itself up and does exactly the same again. These people have no conscience.
Yeah, it's absolutely no coincidence, is it, that this has happened at this particular moment in time? Like you say, it's sort of been in the pipeline for a long time, certainly months, if not years, but it's almost the perfect time, for want of a better word, for this to come in from the owner's perspective, because there's going to be as little opposition to it as there ever could be.
Yes, and they had to time it in respect of the announcement for the new Champions League from UEFA. I think even they felt that to have publicly signed up and for Agnelli to be the head of the ECA when the new Champions League was announced would perhaps even for him look inappropriate. So therefore they put out this announcement, and again 11-11 to try to say that to try to tie it in to the time of the announcement of the in respect of Armistice Day in effect was just a huge indication of completely out of touch and the contempt that they have for football fans. And we are talking as football fans. This is contemptuous. We are simply a product to be monetized and exploited by these people and provide a backdrop in the form of the atmosphere, which helps them to make more money when they're selling the broadcast rights.
Do you think there's an element of brinkmanship with UEFA in the fact that if they don't, because we've already seen that there's been clubs saying no. Clubs that they would have hung their kind of hat on saying yes, so your FSGs and Bayern Munich and Dortmund, but and we've also had Porto say no to this. So now you've kind of got teams who would have formed kind of to the back of the queue of this farce of a league, saying that, well, we don't want any part of it. But does this? It seems antagonistic towards UEFA. And obviously Seferin's comments yesterday were kind of a testament to that. Branding them snakes, etc. Strengthen their hand when it comes to the negotiating table to get the reform that they want from the Champions League. Because ultimately they wanted greater say when it comes to being able to negotiate TV broadcasting rights and to be able to kind of further upscale their own commercial deals through it. And UEFA wanted to maintain a veto over certain elements of it. So it just seems like it's a case of picking up the ball and taking it home with you because you didn't get what you want. So it's just a case of we'll press ahead with this now and we don't care what the fallout.
Yes. Is this tournament definitely going to go ahead? I don't think anybody can say that. Could it be used to extract further concessions from UEFA? Yes. I think one of the key issues, as far as they are concerned, is that the franchise clubs want to be able to sell some of their own broadcast rights for these matches. So I think in terms of the proposals for the franchise leagues, there's 2 divisions of 10. So therefore each club has 9 home matches. And I think it's going to be that 3 of those home matches would be able to be sold by the club direct to consumer, effectively on a pay-per-view basis. And there is some rationale in that. Manchester United claim to have 1.1 billion fans on the planet. Now, I take that with a pinch of salt because it's been put together by a marketing agency, and usually you take everything that they say with a healthy degree of skepticism. But if they do have 1.1 billion fans, last year, in 2019, pre-pandemic, they generated £627 million of income. That works out as 57 pence per fan per year. That's an absolutely lousy return. So if they could sell 3 matches and get 10% of their fans to sign up for a pay-per-view and charge them £2 each, that's £200 million per match. In 3 matches, they would get the whole of the amount of money that Manchester United usually generate in a year. And because UEFA turned round and said, no, we want to sell the TV rights en bloc as a whole product, this, I think, is the key issue. This was certainly also the key issue, or one of the key issues, in respect of Project Big Power Grab that we had last year. Although it's, that didn't generate the same degree of hostility. There was still sycophants, cheerleaders, lickspittles, and Lord Haw-Haws saying that was a good product a few months ago. But nobody's saying this is good apart from the clubs themselves. That, I think, is a critical issue for the clubs. They want control over broadcasting.
I think that's one of the things with Jerry Cardinal and the sort of new investment with Redbird, isn't it, Dave? Is that something that their expertise would be useful to FSG? And am I right in understanding that that's something that they pretty much have their eyes on at Liverpool long term?
I think so. I mean, in previous kind of interviews before his investment, Jerry Cardinal talked about how being able to own the rights to broadcasting in European football was kind of a huge boon, as opposed to there's always been this thing in the US, and even some of his kind of Redbird executives have said that there's more guardrails, I suppose, around ownership in the US about what they can and can't do. But ultimately, it serves to the purpose of bettering the product for everyone, because there's an equal playing field at the end of every season. But Jerry Cardinal comes from a background of kind of selling the rights around content. So the Yes Network was something he was a big player in, which was basically is the biggest regional sporting network in the US and sells broadcasting rights for the New York Yankees and other kind of New York sides across the region, and that's hugely profitable. And he's talked in the past about vertically integrating new media. So it's all business speak, but it's a case of being able to sell your own rights, or like Kieran mentioned before, being able to sell the broadcast rights from the clubs themselves and be able to own that kind of element of content, and also things like the experience of AI and all these type of things will end up becoming part and parcel of football, because it's such a global sport. People want to have the experience of going to Anfield that have never had that wouldn't be able to physically. So all this will come into play, and I think, given the fact that Cardinale is also very interested in the razzmatazz and the showbiz aspect of it. I mean, he's a part owner of the XFL, which in effect is going to fill the void in the spring in the US when the NFL season comes to a close, and it's a competition which was ultimately set up by the king of making kind of sporting entertainment showbiz, which was Vince McMahon. So he's obviously taken on the mantle of that now. But the same thing counts. I mean, the idea behind the whole thing is that it will be a more they're free to use all the things that we might find a bit garish in terms of how they present a product. So whether it's miking up players or kind of the ownership or the head coaches and this, that, and the other, and turn it into almost a soap opera every game. And he's teamed up with The Rock for this, so it's being able to leverage that kind of superstardom. And lo and behold, Liverpool have one of the biggest global superstars in the ranks in FSG now in terms of LeBron James. So the whole thing seems to tie together very nicely. I don't think it's simply a case of them looking to use this money to add a few clubs to the portfolio. I think there's no way these discussions took place and Jerry Cardinal and LeBron James didn't know that this Super League plan was going to be hatched and there were going to be all these potential opportunities. So it all becomes a bit clearer now. But obviously in Cardinale, I think that he is someone who knows how to monetize. And I come back to that word all the time, monetize fandom. And we saw on social media yesterday that we're already seeing the term legacy fans being branded around, and kind of as clubs target new fans, new markets that have opened up through this. And I'm sure, Kieran, that kind of term of legacy fans sends shivers down your spine.
Yeah, I think anybody that's ever been to Halifax on a Tuesday night, I think they've got their legacy fan. Yeah, I have as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the wider sort of impact of sponsors and all of this sort of thing, I mean, what happens, say, for example, with the Nike deal, things like that? What will these sponsors be thinking? Will they have known this sort of thing was coming? Will they have to even reconsider the terms of this deal? Because the actual football matches and the whole product is going to be completely different. Does that not have a knock-on effect in that regard, as well as obviously the TV and all the rest of it?
There will be small print. There will be clauses in all contracts for major change of events. If Liverpool were relegated, there's a clause which says that Nike would be paying less money. So that's fairly standard brick business practice. Would Nike be in favour of this? Yeah, absolutely, because it's more publicity for their products. If this tournament, if this franchise league is a success, and then we don't know A, whether it's going to take place, and B, whether it's going to be a success, then as from Nike's point of view, it's an opportunity to sell more product. And again, bottom line is a driver, and you accept that from a sportswear company, everybody, because ultimately it's selling merchandise. You don't expect it from a football club because it represents the city. It represents the values of Bill Shankly, which Liverpool fans might like to associate themselves with, and the custodians of the club. We expect them to have some form of moral or ethical compass, but sadly that's lacking.
I suppose this is almost an impossible question, given we don't know whether this will actually end up happening. But in terms of the summer transfer market, if this was to happen, would we then expect transfer fees to shoot up? Would there be, an issue, say, for Bayern Munich or Paris Saint-Germain or teams that are not inside this 12? Would they suddenly be at a huge disadvantage in terms of that?
I don't think they would, because remember, the UEFA Champions League will still be taking place. It will be taking place with Bayern Munich, with PSG, with Porto, with Ajax, with Rangers. Potentially could also be taking place with West Ham and Aston Villa and Leeds United. And those sides, are they as global as Liverpool, Manchester United and Chelsea and so on? No, they're not. But they still have sizable followings. And I think within Europe, all of us legacy fans will not be tuning in to the new competition. And I would encourage everybody who is a fan, if BT sign up for that, right, I'm cancelling my BT subscription. And I think there will be a huge backlash from fans' organisations. I've never known so many Liverpool fans giving thumbs up to Gary Neville as has happened in the last 24 hours. It must have made their skin crawl, but Gary Neville was absolutely brilliant. He spoke with passion, and he spoke in a measured way in terms of the betrayal of the game by these individuals. I think there will be a product backlash. We are living in the era of cancel culture, and that would be something I'd even consider pirating rather than. And I'm as compliant legally as I'm neurotic about things, about doing the right things, but I'm not giving a penny to anybody that gives support to these organisations.
We've already seen kind of the early. I mean, the suggestion is that the likes of Amazon, Disney, Comcast, so kind of DAZN, so companies that aren't traditional broadcast companies for the English Premier League are all been mentioned around the edges, but we've already had BT Sport kind of condemn this. Obviously, it's self-interest, isn't it? Because they don't want to devalue the product that they already have. But it does seem that there is going to be a kind of bit of militancy around this. Yes, and would it really move the dial forward for Amazon? Amazon Prime is a pretty good product, and if they add the football on top, it's sort of a cherry on the cake. Amazon will realise that if this is a public relations disaster, why run the risk of incurring the costs of having to pay broadcasting rights to the clubs when there is a potential consumer backlash where people will be switching off? They are. I think these tech companies are actually probably more conscious of the perception of them than the football club owners themselves.
Just before we finish then, we'll go to each of you on this in terms of a gut reaction so far. What has happened? Do you think the Super League in its sort of current form, will it end up happening, or are fans going to protest enough that this can be stopped? Dave, I'll come to you first. What's your gut reaction at this moment in time?
I don't think it will. It makes me sick to my stomach. I mean, I'm a Legacy fan. I've watched non-league football for the past 20 years. So it is everything which flies in the face of what football is and what makes the game good and what's great about it. And it's been the fact that the men in their 70s in grey suits who don't even reside in this country can figure out what's the best course of action for our own game makes me sick to my stomach. I think it's a horribly thought out idea. The timing of it is crass, to be mild, and I hope to God it doesn't happen, because I think it will be the death knell for the game as we know it. I suppose it sends the wrong message, and it accelerates our path and direction that I don't think any of us want to go in. And ultimately, I mean, while it will open up competition for the other clubs, our footballing history is based on having, your Liverpool and United and these clubs in amongst us. Just because they're big now doesn't mean we should. The fans themselves don't want this. Don't want to see that happen. They want to be part of English footballing culture, and I just would hate to see it destroyed by people who don't understand footballing fandom in this country and what it truly means. But my gut reaction is that I don't think it'll happen. I think it is a PR disaster which FSG and the like will not be able to row back from, and will be on their epitaph when they do come to leave the football club.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page in that we don't want it to happen. Kieran, I suspect you're probably going to say something similar, but if that is the case, how do we get back to a situation where we can carry on as close to normal as it was before? I mean, in terms of FSG, their reputation now is in tatters. I think whichever way this goes, the best case scenario is that it collapses. But even if it does collapse, whatever they say moving forward, their reputation is just absolutely finished now.
I don't think they're worried about their reputation. They're worried about bottom line. In terms of the competition, given the extent to which JP Morgan have been involved and the money which is in theory coming forward to these clubs, they would not have just done this if it was a negotiating tactic. So my gut reaction is it 60-40. It is going to take place. What are the benefits? There are none apart from the benefits to the owner. FSG will just stay in Boston and not worry about what's happening in L4. Not that they ever have. But anybody who tries to claim that the Glazers and John Henry have the best interests of English football at heart, well, they should hang their heads in shame.
Yeah, certainly been a lot of hollow words over the last few years. I think it's been proven now by FSG. But fascinating stuff from yourself, Kieran, as always, and Dave as well. Thank you both for joining me. We've certainly not heard the last of this story, and of course, we'll continue to cover it extensively across the Liverpool Echo and Blood Red too. If you're not signed up yet to the Blood Red newsletter, make sure you do that. The link for that is in the description. There's never been a better time to get the direct insight from our journalists straight into your inbox. For now, though, from myself, Matt Addison, from Dave Powell, and our guest, Kieran Maguire, that's all we've got time for. Goodbye for now.